Good afternoon. Welcome. We're going to start our public session. I am Bill Pickett, President of WSBA. I want to say welcome to everyone who's here. Welcome to our January meeting. We're going to hear in a few moments from our Access to Justice Board. I am looking forward to hearing from them. Before we start, just a reminder to the governors, please turn on your mics if you remember before you speak. If you forget, Rex will remind us. The other thing I want to say is I have got my cell phone here. I'm going to try to make every effort during the meeting to not be texting and emailing, and I know how hard that is because we're all busy. But just a kind reminder that if we could maybe not shut them off, but put our attention on the speaker, it would be wonderful. I've been doing some reading of late about how we're sort of contributing to the fracture of society by looking at people pretending to engage in conversation while we're texting two or three other people and really missing what's being said. So there's one of my, and a Happy New Year. I want to say that too. So as we charge forward into the new year, maybe we could take that into consideration. With that said, this next item on the agenda is a report from executive session. I can just say it was really fast. So fast I hardly remember it. That's because we haven't had it yet, so there's nothing to report. And then next on, we're going to move on. Next on the agenda is the report of the President and the Executive Director. Paul, do you have anything? Or am I skipping something? No? Go ahead.
I thought we were hearing from the interview.
We are.
I was going to do mine tomorrow.
I'm just following the order here. I got yeah. Okay, so Paul's is deferred. And I don't know that I have a report as much as I have just a reminder. So I'll give mine now, and then I'll probably give it again tomorrow too. Just as a reminder to the board, it's a great time at the beginning to the board and anybody who's listening for that matter. This is a great time in the year to always try to go back and reflect on what it is that we're trying to accomplish when we sit around this table. And I know I'm not going to reiterate it, but I know we've got a mission statement, and I'll just remind us that mission statement talks about us, that is the governing body of WSBA, first and foremost serving the public, serving the members, looking after and protecting the integrity of our profession, and also championing justice, that elusive thing called justice. So as we charge forward into 2019, I think all of us would do well to reflect on that mission statement. And then if any of you thought I would stop talking without mentioning trust, relationship, and service, you're wrong. Because if you recall back in September, what I said is the three touchstones that we would lean on while we try to accomplish that mission of serving the public, the members, the integrity of this profession, and the justice issue. We would lean heavily on those three principles. And I think we have struggled. We have struggled. And my hope is that as we charge into 2019, that we go back and we reflect on the accomplishments that we've made, and we really try to ask those questions. Number one, what have we done to serve the public in the last few months? The public that we are sworn to serve. What have we done to serve the members? What have we done with regard to the integrity of the profession? And what are we each doing collectively and individually to champion justice? And my hope is that each one of us, and I'm not calling on anybody to stand up and say, this is what I think we've done or haven't done, but my hope is this, that each of us that sit around this table, and even the folks who are here present in the audience or anybody that's listening, will take a few minutes and reflect on their own life and to see what are they doing to build those areas if you're in the legal profession? And more importantly, for the board, are we trying to leverage trust, relationship, and service in a positive way to meet those objectives? Okay? Because I think we can get lost in the battles and the bickering and sometimes the difficult challenges that we face. So whenever you can, my hope is that you'll take some time to reflect on that. That's the President's report / comments. Do we have a consent calendar? So who's got the consent calendar? Paula does. Okay. And you're going to pass it around? Does anybody want to pull anything from consent? Thank you. Anybody, anything on the consent calendar that you want pulled? If not, we're going to pass it around for initials. I'm looking and I'm not seeing anything. So that will come around, if you would, please, when you get it, sign off, and that will expedite some of our work. And now, Sal. Sal Mangia is here. As the governors know, we have our Access to Justice Board. This is an orientation for our governors, and I will turn it over to our board, who we greatly appreciate, and we want to say thank you for being here and allow you to educate us. Thanks.
Mr. President, thank you, and governors and staff. We are so pleased to be before you and tell you about what the Access to Justice Board is about. And, you know, as your president told you, Rex wants me to hold this. What your president told you, part of your mission statement for the Washington State Bar Association is to champion justice, right? But you can't have justice unless you have access to the justice system. So that's why we're here. And before we even start, can I just have the rest of our board? You're going to hear from me and two of my fellow board members, but the rest of the board who are here, just briefly introduce yourselves. I'd love that, just so you get to know them.
Terry Price.
Esperanza Borboa.
Oh, I'm Diana Singleton, staff to the board.
And Bonnie Sturkin, staff to the board.
So I understand we have approximately half an hour. So this is the 30,000 foot level. Okay, we're not going to get too far down in the weeds, but just to kind of get you acquainted with the Access to Justice Board. And as the president said at the luncheon, we were the first board created in the nation back in 1994. And initially, when the state Supreme Court, because we are a direct creature of the state Supreme Court, issued the order, it recognized that access to the justice system was a fundamental principle of the judiciary. And if you have any doubts whether it's a fundamental principle to our Bar Association, you should have none, because within that very order, it states that it's a fundamental principle for our Bar Association, access to justice. And when we talk about access to justice, what we're talking about is people who otherwise, because of economic, because of the color of the skin, because of their physical abilities, don't have the same abilities to access the justice system as others do. And that's why we're here. This order has been renewed every 5 years after that first. It was only the first order was for 2 years. I think they were trying to see whether it's going to work out or not. It did. It did work out. And now there are 39 other states that have access to justice boards. But we were the first, and we are continuously going on. So when we talk about access to justice, let me tell you, even though we strive to achieve that, and that's our mission, that's our goal, that's what the state Supreme Court has told us we have to do, not to try to achieve justice, not to promote access to justice, but we're here to achieve access to justice. That's the court order. That's the mandate for all of us who serve on this board. And let me tell you, I'll tell you about the 10 board members. All 10 are committed to not just furthering access to justice, but achieving access to justice for all. When we talk about access to justice, you know, it's just this high kind of concept. But what it really means are people who have access to health care, people who have access to housing, people who don't get beat up by their spouses, people who don't have to be in solitary confinement. Let me tell you, Columbia Legal Services, one of our providers, just reached a settlement with King County, where King County was putting juveniles in solitary confinement. I want you to sit here and think about just for a second. Juveniles in solitary confinement was going on in Seattle until Columbia Legal Services brought suit. So when we talk about access to justice, don't think about it as this concept. This affects people. This affects them mentally, affects them physically, and literally it can be matters of life and death. Wellness and unwellness, physical safety as opposed to not being physically safe. The Access to Justice Board, I love our board. I love our board. 10 members, talk about the most diverse board ever, probably equally diverse. 10 women, 10 men, at least 5 people of color. We have 3 from the east, or 2 from the east side. And I'm not talking about Bellevue, although we do have 1 from Bellevue. I'm talking from Spokane. We've got a public defender. We've got 3 judges, a federal judge, a state court judge, and an administrative law judge. We have a breadth of experience, people who have worked all their lives. And I'm looking at one behind me, Esperanza, who's been around, who's traveled around this state for the betterment of people. And these are the people who are on your Access to Justice Board. We are appointed for 3-year terms, which can be reappointed for 1 additional term. So we can serve 6 years altogether. But this is our goal, is to coordinate, to facilitate, to educate the public, to educate the legal community. And again, the ultimate goal is to achieve access for all. I've got this map up on the overhead there just to show you the different civil legal aid providers. And there are some primary ones that I want you to at least know about. There are many of them, but you should at least know about Northwest Justice Project, who is the largest civil legal aid provider in the state. And then there's Columbia Legal Services, Northwest Immigrant Rights Project, Team Child. All of those will have dots up on the board. Now, this is a little misleading because at least, you look at that and say, hey, that looks pretty good. But, in some of those places, it may be 1 attorney. Some of those places may be 2 or 3 attorneys. As you can see in Eastern Washington, they have to represent a large area of people, large geographic area. When civil legal aid was started, and actually was started under the Nixon administration, the benchmark for having civil legal aid representation for those within 125% of the poverty level was 1 attorney for every 5,000 eligible recipients. 1 for every 5,000, not a great number, but that was kind of the benchmark. We're at about 1 out of 12,000 in the state. So we are dearly in need of more resources. We just had an updated civil legal needs study a couple of years ago. It got completed in 2015. Shows that 70% of the eligible people for civil legal aid we can't represent. We don't have the resources for. I just want to make sure this board understands that. It's a fundamental principle, and we are failing at this fundamental principle. And you all are leaders of our Bar Association. These are some of the other providers. I listed off the major ones, but they're about 17 different county volunteer legal service programs, or volunteer legal programs, and also some specialty programs, such as I think I've mentioned Team Child, Unemployment Law Project, Solid Ground. Each try to provide representation. And what the state plan, what the ATJ board is charged with, is trying to make sure that with scarce resources, that we provide an effective network of representation so at least no segment of the population doesn't have any chance of getting legal representation. And I'm going to conclude here with my part, and then I'll talk to you at the very end before I turn it over to my 2 fellow board members about funding. Funding. I want you all to know that the legal aid providers have 3 major sources of funding. There's the federal government, there's the state government, and there's private money. The largest source is state money. The second largest is the federal government. And actually, 2017, the private money made up about 15% of the funding. So primarily governmental funding. Now, governmental funding is great except for the fact that there are strings attached. There are restrictions on what federal and state funds can be used for. So in other words, no class action lawsuits, no representation of undocumented workers. So you have segments of the population that if you take federal funds, you can't even use private funds to represent anyone falling within those restricted categories. It is, if you will, a poison pill. It's a pill that we need to take, but it's a pill that puts on big restrictions on Northwest Justice Project, the main recipient of the governmental funds. So that's why I always talk about the third source of funding, the third leg of the stool, private money, which is platinum money. Platinum because it can fund the stuff that the federal government, the state government prevents us from doing. And there are a couple of major sources within the private funding. One is the IOLTA funds, right? So the interest on lawyers' trust accounts. Great, it was great when the economy was booming, and that's why this is kind of skewed right now. In 2017, only 15% of the funding was by private sources. That was different back in 2007 to 2009, right? Economy was booming. So in 2017, IOLTA funds raised about $2 million. In the boom year of 2019 or 2009 before the crash, it was 9 million. So think of 9 million and it went down to 2 million. The civil legal aid system crashed in 2009. We saw huge layoffs, huge holes within the alliance. And we went and tried to stop the hurting as much as we can. Big thanks to the Gates Foundation, big thanks to the Washington State Bar Association, because again, we're talking about people's lives. But that hasn't come back. That hasn't come back at all. But governmental funding has its ups and downs and has its restrictions. So we have the IOLTA accounts. We have the Campaign for Equal Justice. And I know that it's been a tradition, and I trust it's still here. It is today that every member of the Board of Governors contributes in some manner to the Campaign for Equal Justice each year. It is so important for all of you to be leaders. I don't care what the amount is, but you've got to do that because you are leaders. And making sure you have 100% representation from the Board of Governors for the Campaign for Equal Justice. We have an endowment. Did you know we're the only state in this United States that has an endowment for civil legal aid? Last year, the endowment gave about $700,000 to civil legal aid. The endowment's now at about $16 million. They're working to try to get up to $20 million so they can start kicking off $1 million per year. Stable, if you will, clean platinum money. So that's another source. And then we have Cypre funds, which for those of you who have been following the state, U.S. Supreme Court, that's going to be a little bit in doubt as to maybe how those Cypre funds can be used. But all of that is, if you will, the clean source, which can fund Columbia Legal Services, Northwest Immigrant Rights Project, those sorts of vital parts of our network to ensure that, in fact, everybody at least has a chance. I'm not saying they're going to get it, but at least everybody has a chance at representation. That is the 30,000-foot level, but I really do want this board to at least recognize what the main players are, who the main players are, and the sources of funding, and in fact, your roles as leaders in making sure that, because access is a fundamental principle, that you're carrying out that leadership role. So I'm going to turn it over to, so Michelle's going to go next, right? Okay.
Yes. Thank you, Sal, and thank you to the Board of Governors for having us here today. I am Michelle Lucas. I'm an Access to Justice board member. I am also one of the Alliance providers. So I'm a civil legal aid attorney here in King and Snohomish County. And I want to talk to you a little bit about something that the Access to Justice Board is working on right now, and that's our state plan for the coordinated delivery of civil legal aid services. And the purpose of the state plan is to provide guidance to all of the civil legal aid providers for the best way, as Sal was talking about, that we can work together to make sure that the people who have the least amount of access to the justice system are getting the access that they need, and that the organizations that we work with are reaching out to those groups of people. And doing that starts with identifying where those needs are. And so, as Sal mentioned, these are some statistics on the civil legal needs study of 2015. I'm not going to read it off to you, but one of the really important things that it highlights is that people of color are disproportionately impacted by a lack of access to the justice system and by poverty in general. Another important statistic is that the average low-income household in Washington experiences approximately 9 legal issues every year that they're not receiving assistance on. Also, that number doubles to close to 20% if there is domestic violence or other sort of family violence issues in a household. So the information in the state plan led the Access to Justice Board to work on developing the statewide plan for coordinated delivery of civil legal aid. And this is a plan we are in our second year of this plan. So it's in place from 2018 to 2020. It was developed over 18 months with the Alliance, with input from people across the state. So I think 23 different organizations worked on identifying the goals of this plan and how we can all work together and what needs to be done so that we can reach the most people that we need to. And so I wanted to give an overview of the goals of this plan. As you can see from the graphic, the number one goal is race equity. And that's outlined as the first goal because we really wanted to emphasize that it underlies everything that we're doing. So all of the work that we're doing is viewed through a race equity lens, which is why it's in the center. And goal 2 of the state plan is legal education and awareness. One of the issues identified by the civil legal needs study was legal literacy. It was very low. There are people who, the justice system is hard to understand already, but also people aren't aware of the resources that are available to them. Next is access to underrepresented populations and communities. And so that is just really to emphasize that we need to make sure that we are targeting the groups who tend to be overlooked. The next goal is, I can't read the graphic necessarily, is developing holistic and client-centered services. And part of that is because we realize that the legal issue is not the only problem that a person's family or an individual is dealing with. There are a lot of different things that legal issues impact. It could, if in my line of work, I work with sexual assault survivors. And so my office really focuses on providing holistic services because we can see how a sexual assault can impact someone's housing. They could be not safe where they live anymore. It could impact their employment. They can be struggling at work, or the assault could be by somebody from their office. Or they could not be able to go to work, so they don't have money and they can't pay their rent. There's so many ways that it goes down the line, and there's so many more problems. And a holistic client-centered approach is important because we need to make sure that we're looking at all of the services we provide, that we're treating our clients like people and not like a legal issue. And then the goal 5 of the state plan is systemic advocacy, because a lot of the services that we put in place are Band-Aids for a system that isn't working correctly all the time. And we need to make sure that change is coming from inside the system to make sure that it treats people equally, as opposed to us coming in and trying to fix it from the outside. The Access to Justice Board tries to communicate what it's doing with the legal community, with the state, and across the Alliance organization. But we have a communications committee that works on all of that. And so there's a number of projects that the communications committee is working on. There's a monthly newsletter that comes out. There are webinars that actually focus on state plan implementation. And and a website that lists the Alliance organizations that you should go ahead and check out. I don't have the web address on me at the moment. It's allianceforequaljustice.org. Sorry. But I think that's ready.
Yes. Thank you, Michelle. So Sal introduced our board members. Because all of you are associated with the bar, want to give a plug to Diana and Bonnie, who really are the lifeblood of the board. They do so much excellent work for us, so we're very appreciative. I'm Laura Bradley. I'm an Assistant Chief Industrial Appeals Judge at the Board of Industrial Insurance Appeals, and also an ATJ board member. So Michelle talked about Goal 1, which is race equity. And so as she pointed out, the Civil Legal Needs Study tells us that people of color experience substantially greater number of legal problems. And we've seen this play out across the country, noticing that I heard an article this morning, I think on NPR, that although people of color may not be pulled over more often than people who are white, when they are pulled over, they're more likely to end up being frisked or searched or additional measures taken that white people don't necessarily experience. So that's just one example. So we are working with the entire Alliance to transform structures, policies, practices that perpetuate these disparities. I think we're learning more and more that our political structure is set up to advantage white people. And this is where we need to do our work. And so to do that, we need to become aware of it, first of all. We need to understand how it happened, and we need to work to fix it. So in addition to encouraging the Alliance members to do the race equity work, the Access to Justice Board is doing our own race equity work. And we're doing that through Just Lead, who has some excellent trainers on these matters. And we'll be going through developing a new vision, a new mission statement, and kind of exploring what our X factor is in the Alliance community. What is it that we bring that no one else brings? So we're providing tools to all of the Alliance. We've given them tracking tools. Just Lead has a race equity tool that's available to all of the Alliance members that they can use and change to meet their needs. I'll just mention at this point that the governor also is requiring state agencies to engage in this work. He has a council set up, the DEI Council, and so it's a growing movement and people are becoming aware of it. And I'll just mention that when we talk about holistic justice, there are a whole host of government agencies that affect people's lives by providing benefits, by imposing fines, all measures. And so that's a grassroots place where we need to focus and make sure, just like the governor is asking us to, that there isn't structural mechanisms that are affecting people disparately. So it goes beyond the courts, because many of those problems start with a government agency. So I just want to give a plug for that. So we're doing it, the Alliance is doing it, and it's really exciting, interesting work. The other piece I want to talk to you about is the ATJ Technology Principles version 2.0. The ATJ board has a technology committee because technology is seen to be really critical to providing access to justice. And we want to make sure that we do that in an intentional way that actually does increase access and doesn't create new barriers. So the principles were first developed in 2004, and a couple of years ago, the Supreme Court suggested to us that it might be time for an update. And so I also want to give a plug to Sart Rowe, because he led the beginnings of this process to update our principles. And again, just like Tara did with the state plan, we wanted to make it inclusive. We wanted to get input from everyone. So we started with a summit, bringing together even national experts on how technology can be used to advance justice. And from there, we began rewriting the principles. So we're at the point now where we have presented them to the Supreme Court once, and we even asked the Supreme Court to make them rules. And while we had done great outreach with the Alliance and with stakeholders, the Supreme Court felt that we had not done enough work with the courts themselves, the inside people. And so we're doing that now. I'm going to be meeting with the clerks next week. We're setting up a webinar on January 25th where everyone is invited to come and give us their comments on the principles. We'll incorporate the comments as we see fit and then go back to the Supreme Court. And our goal with version 2.0, it's a very different format. It's bulleted, it's more concrete, so that we really want people to be able to implement the principles rather than have high-level ideals that are not easily translated into specific technology measures. So, Sal, did you want to make some closing?
Yeah, so the last thing here is we would love for you, all of you, to come to the Access to Justice Conference. This is held every other year, and it's going to be in the beautiful city of, usually I have Francis here. There, thanks, Laura. Spokane, which is really a cool place. I love Spokane. So June 14th to 16th, the Board of Governors. How cool would that be if all of you were there, right? How cool would that be? That would be the coolest thing ever. Really would. So I'm hoping that you all will do that. It's a great weekend. We put on great seminars, great food. There's a ton of judges there. Everybody has a great time. So I'm asking you, come join us. You'll learn some more about access to justice because it is a fundamental principle of who we are. Thank you so much for allowing us this time. We really appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Thanks, Sal. Okay, before we've got a little bit of time here, I want to start. Governors, gather your questions, and I'll come back to you in 1 second. But folks in the audience, Betsy, good to see you. Do you have any questions for these board members?
If there's anything more we can put on.
Thank you. Very much appreciated. Nancy, did you have any questions or comments for these folks?
In Spokane.
You just spent the whole week there.
People should come and spend the whole week. I assume you'll be at the Davenport or the casino or something. Did I hear casino? Northern Quest. Feel free to linger and talk to family law lawyers as well. And I'll encourage my people to come to you.
Thanks, Nancy. And I don't know the gentleman, your name with the coffee. Do you have? You tell me your name.
I'm co-director of litigation for Veterans for Guardianship and Probate Reform.
And your name?
My name's Jonathan Gridell.
Donovan? And I think I met you last time. I apologize, Donovan. Thank you. Any questions, Donovan, for these folks?
I'm not Donovan, I'm Jonathan.
Jonathan. Well, I'm hard of hearing. It's good to meet you. Jonathan, thank you. Any questions for these?
Very informative, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. I don't see any other members. I see board members and staffers. Staffers, any questions for these folks? Key staffers, anybody? Questions, comments? All right. I'm going to open it up to the board members. Do you have any questions or comments for these folks? If you don't, I got a list of them, but I'm going to ask you first.
Bill?
Yes, PJ.
Just an update on the platinum money. The IOLTA income is rising rapidly as interest rates increase, and so the amounts going into the legal foundation are substantially improving. We're rebuilding our balance sheet, and that will translate into more platinum money for justice.
And PJ serves on the board of Legal Foundation of Washington. That's why he knows that. The interest rates now are about 2%. I think they're maybe 2 point something percent. And whereas in 2017, I think the Legal Foundation of Washington gave about $2 million. I think you guys are looking at close to $5 million for grants this year. So PJ's right; it has gone up substantially, and I think that's gonna help.
Thanks, PJ. Anybody else with, yes, sir, Alec.
Question is actually more to you.
Oh, look
and-
out, okay.
And to Paula, and that's just, I heard an invite, and I was wondering about what participation governors have had with the ATJ conference. As I understand, it's every 2 years, so this is the...
Well, in the old days, we used to hold the board meeting, all the boards, ATJ board and LFW and the BOG, everybody used to hold their meeting on Friday, and then we would just adjourn into the conference, and that's changed over time. But any governor who wants to go is funded to go, if that's your question.
So you're all funded with platinum money, I think. 'Cause I'm actually gonna be plagiarizing that, Sal, all over everybody I talk to. I only want platinum money in my life, so that's wonderful. I love that term. Alec, you have another question, or?
Just another thing, if you could, at least, I'd be interested in seeing what the conference agenda looks like, just what takes place, so I can make a...
Right, so we haven't published that yet, but of course, when we do publish it, it'll go out in our newsletter, and I'm sure there will be something in the Northwest Lawyer as well to lead you to a website to see the full agenda.
So,
Yes.
Alex, so the reason it hasn't been set out yet, we just sent out the request for proposals. We have more proposals we've ever had to put on programs, especially from community members. Remember, this is the power of the community working together. So I think it's really going to be, if you will, a little bit different this year, and so exciting. But we don't have a final agenda yet, only because we're in that process of picking out the programs.
Thank you. I have Kim and then Dan.
Is this microphone working? Yes.
Yes.
I just had I guess it's a question along that same line. I'm a criminal defense attorney, so I do, in this current environment, a lot of work with the Northwest Immigration Project, which I think is unbelievable. Do you know if there's going to be anybody from that organization at the conference, or are they giving any presentations? Do you know?
Almost guarantee someone from NERP is going to be there.
Okay.
I will guarantee that. Whether they're going to be part of the program, as I said, we're still in the decision-making phase of what is going to be the program. Going to go through all the proposals.
I'm putting in my vote for them.
Okay, good. And I'm going to actually see you there, Kim, at the conference, right?
Hey, I'm from Spokane.
Okay, well then that's
I might
an
make
easy
it over
one.
there.
I'm going to see all of you there because you're funded, though.
All right, thank you, Dan.
Thanks. I think anyone could agree that criminal defense, DV, and such are priorities. So I certainly understand why you would focus on those as critical things. But I would urge you as a civil litigator that there are things in civil litigation, even in things you might not normally think about, that are very much an ATJ issue. I have clients with, proper cases that maybe sometimes ought to be appealed. And there are things that can be done within our civil rules and RAPs to streamline things like clerk papers and such. It's not unusual in a complex civil litigation. I had a case last year where the clerk's papers cost $10,000 times several for no reason other than, everything's PDFs. And that, unless the lawyer wants to front the money, the client's dead in the water despite the fact they have a meaningful appellate civil right that needs to be vindicated. It's directly an ATJ issue when you're talking about, I have a case right now, it's a discrimination case on appeal. Well, that lady, we believe, has been horribly discriminated against, and, she faces $15,000 on cost on appeal for no reason that I can really discern other than the clerks use it as an opportunity at times to generate funds. It would cost nothing in terms of amending a few RAPs. I just ask you guys to keep that in the back of your mind somewhere, that there are other issues, as critical as the criminal issues are, and they should be dealt with first. I'm not taking away from that. But there are other civil issues that might not normally be thought of that we could, increase access to those litigants as well.
Thanks for those comments, Dan. And the Technology Committee is continuing to try to talk with the clerks about the way they're interpreting the statute for providing copies. And you're right, it's kind of a political issue because the clerk's offices are funded by the counties, and the counties want them to generate money through that process. So it's something that we're not going to give up on, though, because it is critical, and in an electronic age, there's no reason for that. As far as other non-criminal issues, we do work across the spectrum. And in fact, one of the projects I'm working on right now is hopefully being able to establish an agency that can provide pro bono representation for people with disabilities who are in administrative hearings, because many of them end up at a disadvantage without the representation of an attorney. But there really isn't much of a place for them to go. So we'll keep the broad spectrum out there.
And Dan, we are concerned with access to the civil justice system, although there are certainly overlaps when you're in the criminal system, such as legal financial obligations. Being a victim of domestic abuse really has a lot of civil aspects to it. But this is what we're focusing is on the civil side.
Right. Like, for instance, in Snohomish right now, I have a case where the clerk's papers were $10,000, which is, for a PDF they transmit to the court. They wanted another $10,000 to copy the PDF they'd already made. So it does become an issue, and I have a case right now that I'm not going to appeal because I'm done funding costs, but the client can't afford it, so it's a problem.
All right, other questions or comments? I'm looking to my right. This side of the table is light. So,
Mr. President,
Russell.
Mr. President, it's Rex Nolte, Broadcast Services Manager. I do have a comment.
Go ahead.
So obviously we'd love to see you all in Spokane and hope you can make it, but the Broadcast Services team has been scheduled to be on site to record as much of the event as possible. So you will have access, and we'll use technology to give you that access to those programs. And we're lucky enough to spend 3 weeks in a row in Spokane for RPPT, Access to Justice, Family Law to wrap it up.
Thank you, Rex. Appreciate it. All right, I'm looking around the room. We've got about a couple of minutes here. We don't have to take them all, but anybody else that is sitting there thinking, darn it, I should have asked this or I should have commented, and you're urged. Carla, there it is, right there. Bingo.
Well, and following up on Dan's question or comments, is there any movement afoot that you know of, or would this possibly be an idea to see if the clerk's office could be legally authorized through the legislature to waive fees for people who are indigent or qualify financially, for getting copies of documents or clerk's papers for an appeal? Or I know there's a way that filing fees can be waived in family law cases, for example, or they can ask to pay for it in installments. But have you heard of anything like that? It just occurs to me that might. I know the clerks don't have the discretion to do that on their own, but if they were legally authorized, perhaps that would be something that could then be done.
Is while the statute does read shall, it really was enacted when everything was done by paper, and so but the clerks have interpreted that to mean same cost for paper as there is for an electronic copy, and we've been trying to convince them that may be not the required interpretation. But I think that's a good point. Maybe there should be a measure proposed to waive for people who can't afford it.
And I'm not as versed in this particular item, but I will tell you this: the county clerks aren't part of the court system, and that's part of it. They're their own kingdom, fiefdom, whatever you want to call it. So it's not something that the courts can impose upon them. It makes it a little more challenging. But there is cooperation between the clerks and the judiciary, but it gets tricky. Okay.
Well, that's what I was thinking, if it was a legislatively authorized thing that the court clerks could waive and the parameters, then they're authorized to do that. And I think they'd want to if they can.
That last part is subject to interpretation, seriously, because of what Dan said. It's a moneymaker.
All right, any other questions? I don't see any. I just want to say thank you for being here. I also want that little map that you put up that shows all. Is a big map. That's a big map there that shows all the little dots where legal services providers are. I am so proud to be a member of a profession that has expanded out to our state to provide these services in so many different areas. Because while we all sort of live on this, we all live on the same planet, we're in a multitude of different worlds. And you folks and what you do is actually changing worlds for people in huge ways. And in a couple of weeks, I'm going to get a chance to go over to Cambodia. And one of the things I just discovered is for the entire country, there's just a little over 1,300 lawyers to try to reach out and care for the legal needs of a lot of people who have a lot of needs. And we are so blessed. While we're still falling short, we are so blessed to look at our great state and to see the legal services and the access to justice folks have branched out and are working tirelessly to improve and change people's lives, or literally their world. So for that, we all applaud you. And with that said, the last thing, and I want you to have this last word, is there anything other than bringing our platinum dollars to Spokane? Is there anything else we as a board specifically can do to support you in your efforts?
You all, because it is part of our professional rules. Every member of this board should be doing some pro bono work. I don't care how much it is, as much as you're doing some pro bono work. So once someone told me you can tell where someone's values are by looking at their checkbook and their calendar. And that's what I'm looking for all of you, your checkbook and your calendar, to in fact make sure that access to justice is a fundamental principle that you hold dear.
Thank you, Sal. Thanks all of you. Very much appreciated.